Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Neuroalchemy, a NeuroSynergy podcast where science meets soul and where healing is explored as a nonlinear, multidimensional journey of becoming. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. And before we begin, I want to name something central to how we do everything here. Here on Neuroalchemy, we define every term as if you're hearing it for the very first time because clarity creates safety, and safety opens the door for more healing opportunities. That just means we slow the conversation down, we translate ideas into human language, and we make space for learning without pressure or performance. Today's conversation is about how change actually happens, not just insight, not just awareness, but the structures that allow healing to stick. Today, I'm joined by A.B. Kaura, founder of the Thought Architecture System, often called TAS. AB works in human behavior and cognition, and his work focuses on a pattern many people experience but struggle to name. People understand their patterns, they've done the therapy, they have insight, and yet their nervous system keeps returning to familiar loops. AB's work explores how unconscious thought patterns create an internal structure or architecture that shapes human emotional regulation, behavior, and long term outcomes. What I appreciate about his approach is that it doesn't blame people for being stuck. Instead, it offers structure, awareness, and repetition as pathways towards sustainable neuroplastic change. AB, I'm really glad you're here. Welcome to Neuroalchemy.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me today. And I'm very thrilled not only to answer, but to share my research with your uh, people out there, with the audiences. And I think sharing is caring.
Before we move into our content for today, I'd love to begin by doing just a gentle check in. How are you arriving today, AB? And that can be as multidimensionally as you feel to share.
I feel like, especially with my work and doing this whole podcast with you, I feel very not just excited and thrilled, but I feel that, with this work, The Art of Supreme is my debut book, as for the readers as well. I feel more than just happy because I feel that the research always, when shared, makes everybody happy because research is like refresh, and I feel refreshed. I would say in one terminology, I feel very refreshed to share this thought architecture research with your audiences today.
Thank you for sharing that. And to all of our listeners out there, remember there's no right way to arrive. However, you are showing up today is enough. Before we go deeper, I want to orient our listeners by defining a few core ideas. AB, I'd love to start here. When you say thought architecture, what does that mean in simple everyday language?
Sarah, so when I use the word thought architecture, so there are like three things, as I've mentioned in my works as well. One's a process, system, structure, and beyond structure is an architecture, basically. So, what I really imply by TAS thought architecture is that when we live our lives, we tend to get too caught up in processes, systems, systematic authorities, and then afterwards we have to work on our own life structures because life is all about you have to build up and everything. You have to build up confidence, you have to build up success, growth, everything you name it, you have to build it up, which implies structure. But then comes a guy like me, AB, who's a researcher, and I practice yoga since. And I think I'm not just. I think I was born in North India, and I'm a born yogin, and that is why I was able to execute this work in the first place. Because if it's not complete, it's hard to execute it. And but coming back to the word architecture, architecture is one cut above structure. And this philosophy that I'm trying to take out to the people, I'm trying to help them understand that you gotta know your abstract, and that's your architecture. Everything else is a framework. Framework comprises of structure, systems, processes, And yes, people, agents, and with professions like we all do have here.
And when we talk about patterns, are we talking about individual thoughts or something larger that organizes how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors repeat?
When we especially talk about patterns, we talk about behavior. Behavior is something, which is like you rub two stones, it creates fire, and fire is a pattern. But those two stones, they make it happen. Similarly, like human beings, we have a certain nature. That nature, how it behaves with other set of natures, as my book explains, that there are four types of natures. Like for example, like how people go to the gym, they track their fitness, so how they understand food composition, how protein when combined with fats and carbs, it creates a pattern. In your body, the body behaves a certain way, and that pattern leads to outcome, reactions, consequences, actions. That's what I really imply by pattern here in my works as human behavior.
Let's also define neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity simply means the brain changes through repeated experience over time, not through force, not through willpower, but through consistent, structured input that the nervous system experiences as safe. Many listeners will recognize this experience. They understand where their patterns come from, they can explain them, and yet their body keeps responding this same way. AB, from your perspective, why is insight often not enough to produce lasting change?
Inside, Sarah, in this whole, my job is to keep you, fully intact, your audience, with the research itself. And when within the yoga philosophy, there's a thing called eight classical insights. They're also called siddhis in yoga. And this is all like reference as well. And which this is a yogan philosophy, which I am fully accomplished in. And when we talk about insights in yoga, you have to be detached yourself to, harness the insight, because insight has been described as nature and you have been described as self. But what happens is when you don't separate the self from the nature, self is not able to, enforce knowledge, because self itself is caught up in the insight. And insight as such is combined of thoughts. And, self has been described as different than a thought or thought insight. So that is why, where I feel that is why there's a lot of stuff been written on the power of detachment. Now, detachment on your own is impossible without doing it without knowledge. But detachment has to serve your knowledge and has to lead up to wisdom. That is the whole idea of usefulness of insight, is to escalate it towards higher optimization, which is wisdom. So for that, that requires detachment, but in knowledge. So it leads up to a certain system, to a structure, to architecture. So I think the lack of knowledge itself doesn't allow people to make use of insights, because like they say, we all know it, but we all don't know how to do it. So for that, you need a reason and knowledge to take it further. Otherwise, it's just you're fighting against darkness.
What's missing when awareness doesn't translate into regulation?
When awareness as such is a very abstract thing, and when you're not able to, so what's missing is framework and abstract. In between, you can just see, there's a void. That's knowledge void, because knowledge has to be, as in my works I say that, like, process, system, structure. So within the framework and the abstract, you need to develop a process, a system, and a structure, and then it becomes a whole architecture of your own self that you can use to fill up that paradox. So I think that paradox is that creates a missing link between the abstract and frameworks, and we have to fill that up with knowledge, but not with a pill, but with the knowledge fill.
Here's something we talk about often on neuroalchemy. The nervous system defaults to what's familiar rather than what's ideal. Familiar patterns feel safer than unfamiliar ones, even when they're uncomfortable. AB, how do unconscious thought structures help lock the nervous system into those familiar loops, even when someone consciously wants something different?
Just the lack of knowledge of food composition doesn't allow people to achieve prime fitness physique. So is your mind composition. When you don't have knowledge of your mind composition, everything will repeat itself because because what you're doing is your composition is the same. Everything else you're just make shifting, changing it. So when you cannot change the essay when the premise doesn't change. So I think because of lack of knowledge of mind composition, due to lack of knowledge of thoughts, people always are gonna feel the patterns should repeat themselves. Otherwise, it's only composition that changes the pattern, nothing more or less. It's just like you go to the gym, you change your proteins, to carbs and to all those things. It just gets very micro optimized. So that's what brings change to the patterns in your body structure, your physique, and everything. It's composition.
Let's talk a little bit more about structure. When you use the word structure, you're not talking about rigidity. You're talking about internal organization, I think. AB, how does building internal structure support safety? And how does safety allow those neuroplastic changes to occur?
Structure is the most secure thing you can ever do. Structure means faith. System means belief system. Process means your capacity and capability to go through that and how far you want to take it. Structure secures you, when beliefs they accumulate, they transform into faith. Similarly, the accumulation of systems lead to a structure. It's in yoga philosophy is called the power of accumulation, and accumulation is what keeps us going. So when people are able to accumulate the process into a system, into the structure, it secures them because it's just like you use a system and a process as scaffolding to build up a building structure. So those beliefs and all the hard work and labor you've been doing in the process system, that only leads to a secure building structure. And when building gets secure, it automatically becomes full of faith, because that's how human conscious thought accumulation works. Everything emanates from conscience, from 0 to 100. So when consciousness accumulates, it creates things from system to structure to architecture. So when they keep working in conscience alone, they are able to accumulate a structure, and that structure is full of faith because it emanated from belief system, the accumulation of beliefs. So that automatically will bring number one, security and peace, not to your mind, not to anything, but to your own conscience. And that's how you secure your conscience through accumulation towards the structure. That is the real faith.
Here on neuroalchemy, we don't separate the mind from the body. Thought, emotion, sensation, and meaning are always interaction. I think you would agree. How do you see thought architecture integrating with emotional regulation and somatic awareness rather than competing with them?
As Sarah, you might also, believe me that not believe me, but you will say through that everything is an output out of conscience, be it a process structure. Otherwise, what's the use of doing anything if you are not tracking your foods or calories? So in health, they have calories. In mind, you have conscience. You got to track your conscience, to optimize it. So, when people they just strictly work on their conscience, they are able to easily perform neuroplasticity in their thoughts. Now, you're asking me about architecture, as such. Architecture is basically the highest level of accumulation point, which comes after structure. And for people, to let's say to overcome their emotions, the patterns and repetitions, architecture is the only solution, which is the highest, accumulation point of your conscience. And everything that we aim to do it exists within conscience. So it's conscience that becomes the intellect, the mind, the understanding. It's a conscience that becomes, the objective, the purpose, the tangibility, and it's a conscience that becomes your subjectivity as well. So when audiences, when people they realize that, when everything is made out of conscience, and it's conscience alone that we aim to secure, we aim to, harness for our own lives, our own good, that's when people realize that they have to always work on their conscience to secure their emotions, to help themselves rise above patterns. And these patterns are also made up of conscience. Emotions are also made up of conscience as well. Otherwise, there's no such thing as emotions as such on their own. So this is all Jungian philosophy where we get to understand that if you just focus on your conscious self optimization, your data, which is your emotions, will automatically get optimized. But you have to optimize the self first things. That's the number one security. And that's the only thing that leads you towards architectural understanding.
I agree that consciousness is the fabric of all things. Many people listening are thoughtful, self aware, and deeply reflective, and yet they still might feel stuck. From your experience, where do most people often what do most people misunderstand, and why doesn't change stick?
People, the main factor just from research itself, I feel the people they misunderstand it. They mix up objectivity with tangibility, and they mix up subjectivity with objectivity. It's like you have a base and you have a pace. But when you mix up pace with your base, and when you mix up your base with your pace, what you do is you disturb the harmony between time and place. The timing and place, the harmony, it's just like your water and flour. You mix it, it becomes a dough. So when people they don't realize how these things were separate before, but they get caught up in the dough itself because of lack of knowledge is number one, and number two is the highest because we as human beings, we have a comprehensive capability to optimize. The modern era is meant for optimization. That's we all enjoying fruits of optimization. End of the day, so we can multitask and have more. But people lose it when they don't optimize the right thing, but they start to optimize something which is excessive, extra, which is not need to be optimized. Because you don't have to optimize your purposes, objectivity, your tangibilities. You have to optimize your subjectivity. Because subjectivity is superior than objectivity and tangibility. So I think if audiences just understand the scale of it and what they need to focus on, what they don't need to focus on, that's what's going to make them really happy.
Is there anything that you wish people understood sooner about themselves?
I want people to understand this for once and for all is that there are only four types of thoughts. And as my work research, and this is a ancient old yogin philosophy, it's a very rare work. And I am an accomplished yogin. I want people to understand just like you go to gym, you track your foods into proteins, carbs, fats, fiber. So do you have thoughts? They go by profit, pleasure, morality, individuality. You get up in the morning, you have coffee. On average, it gives you pleasure. You go to work for profit. You use your common sense. That defines your sense of morality. And then you come back home, you walk your dog, you have your me time. That's your sense of individuality. If you look on the globe itself, you look at North America is about individuality. You go about Europe is about pleasure. You go about Middle East is about morality. You go about Oriental, it's about profitability. So all these, so what these are thought classifications. They were written in yoga theory back in 5th BC. What I've done is since I practice yoga, I'm a born yogin. I was able to like create a whole architecture of sutras of yoga so you can understand how mind composition is controlled by thoughts. If you don't know thought classifications, you cannot optimize your conscience, but you'll always be optimizing things that are, just like products and byproducts of conscience, but you will miss on your own self conscience. That's misery, I think. It's just like you go to the gym, but you never had idea about foods, but you kept working out. You can do that your whole life. It's not gonna give you take you towards a prime physique, be it mental or physical.
We always like to ask each of our guests on neuroalchemy to offer our listeners an invitation rather than a prescription. AB, I'd love for you to offer our listeners a gentle invitation, something they can reflect on, notice, or experiment with this week that maybe supports awareness, structure, safety, or just really anything regarding the work that you're doing, something that they can try each day for the next week and see how it goes.
Would for the people out there, for the audiences, I have built a app for the audience. The app, it's a TAS architectural app. I built up a system, a whole architecture on Instagram. My Instagram handle is the Supreme Experience. See, I am not a big Instagram or social media guy, to be very, very honest to everybody out there. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people understand how to track, trace, and optimize their conscience alone. So for that, I've created just like a mental fitness app. I've created, this fitness app. It's a hybrid work with ChatGPT. What people really need to understand is that let's say I'm a person of pleasure. And how do I interact with profit, pleasure, and morality and individuality? As a person of pleasure, my take on profit is going to be more retail. My understanding of morality is going to be more equal minded. That's how pleasure's ideology works, and how they take on their individuality. And if you just look at, that how just like a lens, if your glasses are green, your world's gonna be green. Your glasses are yellow, your world's gonna be yellow. But you have to understand that how yellow mixes with green and white and blue and black, and how it creates transformations which are called insights. So one nature creates four behaviors and eight types of actions. So those eight actions, they are called eight yogin classical siddhis or insights. They're masteries over 16 reactions, 32 consequences, and 64 final outcomes. For somebody as a user, what you can really do is you can understand your main thought type, that what implies to you. It depends where you were born, the culture you were born in. So that will give you a lens, understanding of lens of your own perspective. From there on, you will understand how it pertains to your own lifestyles. That why do you all the four W's will be solved, because once you know your own lens given to you by the universe, just a prime abstract nature, just like how carbs go with protein, all these things, then you will understand without going through all that, in actuality, but you will be able to gain all that insight and knowledge. So that's what people should start doing. Do Especially do research before they start searching, because searching without researching is again misery. It's again a lot of, it's a lot of work, a lot of struggle, a lot of labor, and it gets very hard to optimize because the premise of research is missing. So with the TAS of my works, that's what I'm giving people is research to establish their searches upon. So then they can link their frameworks with the abstract, and they can always trace, and optimize their consciousness back and forth. It's like you had a meal, but you gotta know what's in it. One, is it carb, is it protein, or otherwise, if you're just having simply meals without knowing the compositions, that's haywire, I would say. That's something which really, is really bad for your mental health. Knowing is very important. That will lead to knowledge, and from knowledge, it will lead to wisdom. That's something I would highly recommend. Yeah.
How long do people usually spend working on this app? I'm just trying to understand for practical purposes if it's the invitation for the week. Are you just suggesting they download it and just kind of play around and check it out sometime during the week? Or is there a specific task within the app itself that you would like for them to try?
Within the app, what I'm really doing, I've laid out the architecture for people to resonate and relate their structures and systems or whatever they are doing within their lives. I just want people to, because everybody nowadays use ChatGPT for all different reasons to understand and to, put together things. Before it was pen and paper, now you have phone and typing in a way. And what I want people to do is I want people to understand their nature type, and I want people to, use the architecture contextual wisdom that I provided on the Instagram page and to accumulate it. So once before if I want people to accumulate first, not to save, but to accumulate first. So they will accumulate everything that pertains to their nature. And that whole process of accumulation, it becomes a practice for people. And that's a real practice for them to, build up in accumulation because they will never go wrong in accumulation and in knowledge itself. So when they land on the TA's architecture, I want them to, you know, first pick their nature type, are they a person of individuality, morality, pleasure, profit? Everything else that pertains to their lives, be it habits, be it your mind, intellect, everything that's going on within your system, you will be able to connect your dots and fill in the blanks. That's what's going to happen. And I want people to accumulate in knowledge first thing. Otherwise, working on things without the glass in the water is not my, approach to take doing anything with yourself. It's like you go to the gym, you gotta have some carbs, you gotta, have some energy, then you go start working out, and then you slowly like, build that beautiful, sculpture, or you sculpt the body after.
One final question. After hearing this conversation, what do you hope most of our listeners walk away understanding about themselves, their patterns, or their capacity for change?
People, I want people to understand that your thoughts are different than yourself, guys. Don't mix yourself with your thoughts. Otherwise, yourself is going to be scattered in many, many thoughts. And when it gets scattered, and it's imagine like your rooms or your kitchen or your washroom is scattered, with things around. How do you feel? And that's what I want people to realize, that your self is different than your thoughts. Thoughts are like you can always cook, boil, and make something out of them, but you have to keep yourself separate. You have to optimize it as well so that every day your knives are sharpened. So that is the prime thing. And, I really want people to understand is self optimization is way, way superior than data optimization. Data involves labor, work every day. Don't get yourself caught up in data. Otherwise, it will make you labor every single day and you will feel that no matter how organized everything you're doing, no matter whatsoever you possess, but you're not optimizing yourself, but you're rather working to optimize the data because yourself is caught up in the data. So I want people to understand that self is different than thoughts, and how important it is to optimize the self for your own self. Otherwise, if you don't optimize yourself, you can never gain mastery of insights. That's number one. And number two, you can never understand that how nature creates behaviors. Never, you will never be able to enjoy the power of detachment, to put in two words. And without that, no matter how much you work on your thoughts, you'll always be laboring for your thoughts because you never optimized yourself. So that's the prime thing. That's really important for your peace. That's something I would really tell the readers to, take it to the mind and heart.
Hey, B, thank you for sharing, and thank you for the clarity, depth, and grounded presence that you brought to this conversation. To our listeners, the links for all of the things that you've heard him speak about today, he's going to provide to me, and they will be available in your show notes. Also, to our listeners, thank you for being here. If you've ever felt discouraged because insight wasn't enough, please hear this clearly. You're not failing. Your nervous system is doing what it learned to do. And with clarity, structure, and safety, change does become possible, also inevitable. This is Neuroalchemy, a NeuroSynergy podcast. I'm Dr. Sarah Young. Until next time, may you meet yourself with curiosity, honor the pace of your nervous system, and continue becoming. Bye for now.
Thank you so